Imagine standing on the back of a military truck, a rough rope already looped around your neck. 20,000 people are screaming below you, some cheering, some cursing your name. The engine revs. The truck lurches forward, and in that split second before the rope snaps tight, you realize this is the end. This wasn't a nightmare. This was July 4th, 1946, on Biskupia Gorka Hill in Gdansk, and the 22-year-old woman feeling that rope bite into her skin was Elisabeth Becker. Welcome to X History, the place where we don't just read history, we feel it in our bones. Today, we're going deep into one of the most shocking public spectacles of post-war justice, the public execution of Elisabeth Becker. Warning, this story gets graphic, disturbing, and brutally honest. If descriptions of violence, concentration camps, or hangings are too much for you right now, hit pause and come back when you're ready. But if you want the full, unflinching truth behind that infamous photograph everyone whispers about, stay with me before we step into 1946. Do this real quick. If you love history that actually hits different, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells YouTube this channel deserves more stories like this. Deal? Let's go. Elisabeth Becker was born on July 20th, 1923, in the sleepy little town of Newtek, today called Neustadt, just a short train ride from Danzig. Picture a normal German girl in the 1930s, blonde hair, bright eyes, the kind of teenager who helped on the family farm, giggled with friends after school, and dreamed about boys and dances, and maybe, one day, her own little house with flower boxes in the windows. She was 14 when everything started to change. In 1936, she joined the League of German Girls, the BDM. At first, it felt exciting. Hiking trips, campfires, songs about the fatherland, even a few innocent crushes on the older boys at the Hitler Youth rallies. You know that fluttery rom-com feeling when you're young and the whole world seems possible? That was Elisabeth in those early days. She wasn't some born monster. She was just a girl. But the Nazi machine didn't care about dreams. By 1938, her family had moved to Danzig itself. She bounced between jobs, shop girl, farmhand, anything to help put food on the table. The war was coming. Everyone felt it. And when the call went out for women to serve the Reich, Elisabeth answered. September 5th, 1944. She was 21 years old. Still just a kid by today's standards. She stepped off the train at Stutthof concentration camp and reported for duty as an SSF Zephyrine, a female overseer. They handed her the uniform, the whistle, the power. She had no idea what she was walking into. The women's section, SK3, was hell on earth. But at first, it probably didn't feel that way. New guards were told they were simply keeping order, protecting Germany, doing their patriotic duty. Elisabeth was assigned to watch over Jewish and Polish women prisoners who were already half-starved, broken, terrified. She told herself she wouldn't be like the others. She'd be firm but fair. She'd just do her job and go home when the war ended. But within days, the mask started to slip. Prisoners later testified that the young blonde guard with the baby face began to change. She started shouting. She started slapping. And then came the selections. Every few days, the SS doctors would line up hundreds of women. You left. You right. Left meant the gas chamber. Right meant another day of slavery. Witnesses swore Elisabeth Becker stood there with her clipboard and pointed. At least 30 times she chose death for women who were too weak to work. She was only at the camp for 4 short months. 4 months. That's it. Yet those 4 months would cost her everything. How does a girl who once blushed at boys at youth rallies become the woman who sent other women to die? The answer is darker than you think, and it's coming up right now. But before we get there, let me ask you, have you ever wondered what really turns ordinary people into monsters? Because what happened to Elisabeth in those freezing barracks is about to get a lot worse. So, 4 months. That's all it took for Elisabeth Becker to go from farm girl with BDM braids to one of the most hated faces at Stutthof. How? It started small, the way most darkness does. A prisoner, too slow to stand at roll call. A slap. A slap that felt justified because she's lazy. She's sabotaging the war effort. Then the slap became a kick. Then the kick became a whip. Witnesses, women who somehow survived, later described her laughing sometimes. Not evil cackle laughing. More like nervous, almost embarrassed laughing. The kind you give when you're trying to convince yourself this is normal. But the selections, those were different. Every few weeks, the camp doctor, usually SS physician Heinz Thilo, or one of his assistants, would arrive with his white coat and his cold eyes. Hundreds of women lined up barefoot in the snow. Elisabeth stood at the side, sometimes holding a list, sometimes just watching. She pointed. One survivor testified at the trial. She looked straight at us and pointed left. She knew what left meant. Left was the gas chamber disguised as a disinfection shower. Women would be told to undress, hand over their last rags, walk inside. The doors would close. Cyclone B pellets dropped through the roof vents. Screams for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Then silence. Elisabeth didn't pull the lever herself. She didn't have to. All she had to do was point. And she did. At least 30 documented cases. Probably more. Why her? Why not just follow orders silently, like so many others? Some said she wanted to be noticed. Some said she was terrified of being sent to the front lines herself. Others whispered she actually enjoyed the power, the way prisoners flinched when they saw her blonde hair coming down the path. We'll never know the full truth. She never wrote a diary. She never explained herself in letters home. But one thing is certain, by January 1945, she had blood on her hands that would never wash off. Then came the end game. January 25th, 1945. The Red Army was 40 kilometers away. Artillery already rumbling in the distance like an approaching thunderstorm. Himmler's orders were clear. No camp was to fall into Soviet hands with living prisoners who could testify, evacuate, or kill. Preferably both. Stutthof began its death march. More than 25,000 prisoners, mostly women, were forced out of the gates into -20-degree cold. No coats, no shoes for many. Just thin striped rags and the promise that anyone who fell behind would be shot. Elisabeth Becker marched with them. Rifle slung over her shoulder. Boots, warm coat. She was one of roughly 50 female overseers guarding the column. Prisoners who collapsed in the snow were beaten, shot, left to freeze. Bodies lined the roads like broken dolls. But something strange happened during that march. Survivors later said Elisabeth sometimes slipped bread to a few of the weakest women when no one was looking. One Polish girl, barely 16, swore Becker gave her half a potato and whispered, "Keep walking, don't fall." Was it guilt? Fear of what was coming? A last flicker of the girl she used to be? Or was she just trying to save her own skin, making sure someone might speak for her later? No one knows. But that tiny act would haunt the trial and haunt her last minutes on Earth. The march lasted 9 days. Thousands died. The survivors who reached the Baltic coast were crammed onto barges, then ships. Many drowned when the vessels were bombed or capsized. Elisabeth made it to the western part of Germany. She ditched the uniform, burned her papers, and tried to disappear into civilian life. She almost succeeded. She found work as a farm helper near Lauenburg, changed her name slightly, dyed her hair darker. For a few months, she was just another war-displaced German woman trying to survive. Until May 1945, British troops rolled into the area. Someone, a former prisoner, a neighbor, recognized that face, the same face that had pointed left in the snow. They arrested her on May 13th, 1945. She didn't resist. She just looked down at the ground and said quietly, "I know why you're here." The British handed her over to the Polish authorities. Gdańsk, once Danzig, was now Polish territory again, and the Poles were in no mood for mercy. By early 1946, she was sitting in a cell in Gdańsk prison, waiting for the most publicized trial Poland had seen since the war ended. The Stutthof trial. 11 defendants. 5 men. 6 women. Elisabeth Becker was number 4 on the list, and the whole world, or at least everyone in northern Poland, was about to watch her die. But before the rope came the courtroom. What she said on the stand would shock even the hardened prosecutors, and what the crowd did when the verdict was read. That's where this story becomes almost impossible to look away from. Part 3 is the execution itself. The truck, the hill, the noose, the screams of the photograph that still circulates today. The Stutthof trial opened on April 25, 1946, inside a former gymnasium in Gdańsk that had been turned into a makeshift courtroom. 11 wooden benches for the defendants. Behind them, a sea of Polish spectators, survivors, families of the dead, journalists, Red Army officers. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and raw anger. Elisabeth Becker sat forth from the left, still only 22, hair pulled back tight, face pale but composed. She wore a simple gray dress the authorities gave her. No uniform, no power left. The charges were read in Polish and translated into German. Crimes against humanity, participation in the murder of prisoners, maltreatment, selections for the gas chamber. Prosecutor TadeuszCyprian.com. Methodical called survivor after survivor to the stand. One woman, barely 40 but looking 60, pointed straight at Elisabeth. "That one. She beat my sister until she couldn't stand." Then she pointed her to the left. "My sister was gassed the next day." Another. "She laughed when we begged for water. She said, 'Drink snow if you're so thirsty.'" Elisabeth listened, head down. Sometimes she shook it slightly, not denial, more like disbelief at how far things had gone. When her turn came, she stood, voice quiet, almost childlike. "I was young. I was afraid. I followed orders. I never wanted anyone to die." She admitted the beatings, admitted the shouting, but the selections. "I only pointed when the doctor told me to. I didn't know. I didn't really understand." The courtroom erupted. Shouts of liar and murderer. Judges had to bang the gavel repeatedly. One judge asked a question everyone wanted answered. "If you were so afraid, why did you stay? Why didn't you run?" Elisabeth looked up for the first time, tears in her eyes, "Because I thought the war would end soon. And I thought I was doing the right thing for Germany." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then the verdicts came down on May 31st, 1946. Johann Pauls, the camp commandant, death. Jenny Wanda Bachmann, the beautiful sadist, death. Elisabeth Becker, death by hanging. 5 women, 5 nooses. The sentence was public, deliberately public. The Polish government wanted the world, especially the Germans, still living in the region, to see justice done. No secret firing squads. No quiet prison executions. July 4th, 1946. Biskupia, Gorka Hill. A place the Germans once used for anti-aircraft guns. Now it would be a gallows. 20,000 people gathered. Families brought children. Picnic blankets. Some climbed trees for a better view. Vendors sold sausages and beer. It felt like a twisted carnival. 5 wooden scaffolds had been built. 5 ropes already dangling. At 5 p.m., the trucks rolled up the hill. First came the men, then the women. Elisabeth was third in line, hands tied behind her back. No blindfold. She walked barefoot. They'd taken her shoes so she couldn't kick. She climbed onto the flatbed of the military truck. The noose was placed around her neck, not gently, roughly, the knot positioned under her left ear. The long drop method. designed to snap the neck instantly. She looked out over the crowd. Some faces she recognized, survivors she had guarded. Their eyes were hard. No pity. The executioner asked the ritual question in German. "Do you have any last words?" Elizabeth's lips moved. Barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Whether anyone heard it over the roar of the crowd, we don't know. The truck engine revved. The driver released the clutch. The truck lurched. Forward 5 bodies dropped at once. A collective gasp from the crowd. Then cheering. Some people clapped. Others wept. A few turned away at the last second. Elizabeth's body jerked once, twice, then swung slowly, face purple, tongue protruding, eyes wide open. She was pronounced dead at 5:17 p.m. Photographers were their official ones and amateurs. One image, the most famous, shows her hanging beside Jenny Wanda Bachmann. Elizabeth's blonde hair has come loose. Her dress flutters slightly in the breeze. That photograph has circled the internet for decades. People call it the last photo of Elisabeth Becker. They debate whether she looks terrified, defiant, or just empty. Afterward, the bodies were cut down, placed in plain coffins, and buried in unmarked graves on the same hill. The public execution achieved its goal. It shocked. It warned. It closed one chapter of retribution, but it also left questions that still echo today. How much of Elisabeth Becker was the system? How much was her? Could that farm girl who once dreamed of flower boxes ever have said no? Or was the moment she put on the uniform the moment she was already lost? History doesn't give easy answers. It just gives us the rope and the drop, and sometimes the face of a 22-year-old girl staring into the lens of a camera, forever frozen between guilt and goodbye. That's the story of Elisabeth Becker. If this hit you, if it made you think, made you angry, made you sad, drop a like. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to see this side of history, and subscribe if you want more stories that don't pull punches. We'll be back soon with another chapter most people would rather forget. Until then, stay curious, stay human, and never stop asking why. Thanks for watching X History.